Now the next thing we're gonna do today is the neutral safety switch. So the headlight's pretty basic, pretty straightforward. The headlights didn't work in low beam mode, but the bulbs were okay because high beams worked. So now with the neutral safety, all you need to know with this is very common on these Jeeps. And if you shoot over my shoulder here, while I sit like this, should be able to get a decent shot here. The idea is you try to start the car and nothing happens. It doesn't crank at all. You literally hear nothing. The fuel pump runs like you're in ignition, but it doesn't start. There's no ticking, nothing. And if you wiggle your shifter back and forth while you're cranking at the same time, it'll fire over. Or if you shift it into neutral and then try to fire it, that'll usually get it to start and it'll start no problem. That's pretty much a dead indication that your neutral safety switch is going bad, or it's corroded, which is mainly just corroded. So we're gonna clean it right now, and I pretty much guarantee it should start every time in park and neutral, which is what it should. So the neutral safety switch is on the side of the transmission underneath, so we're gonna go underneath for that. But those are your symptoms. You try to start the car and it gives you nothing, no noises. It feels like you're not even turning the key even though you are. But if you wiggle it, it'll start, or if you shift it in neutral, it'll start. So let's get into that now. Okay, you're gonna have to take my word for it, but that is your neutral safety switch right there. Now there are 2 bolts. I haven't done this in a minute, but there's 2 bolts that hold it on if I remember. That right there, the top one, is 12 millimeter, and that one is 13/16. It's a giant bolt that's got a little shaft that goes through it, and it's like a oblong triangle type shaped thing that sticks to the passenger side of your transmission. So that's your transmission cooler lines running out. This is an exhaust pipe, and that's the neutral safety switch. If I back up, you can see we're on the passenger side of the Jeep. We go under here, and it's right there. Real hard to get to if you're not lifted. But one thing that I want to mention before you get into any of this, before you take it off, save yourself a nightmare of a trip. Oh, and do this. Pro tip. Okay, up here on the top side, what we're looking at, this is the top side of the electrical connection for the neutral safety switch. And you're looking at it right here. It's this guy. Well, I just kind of pulled it apart because I already disconnected it. But what I'm telling you right now is it's really hard to tell. We're still on the passenger side of the block, and there's 2 different plastic electric terminal connections right here. Female on the top side, male on the bottom side. And it's really hard to tell. You need to go to the bottom side and pull the cord that's attached to the neutral safety switch while someone's up top here looking at it. Because right now I'm telling you it's the one closer to the engine block, but it may be flipped on your application. I can't tell you for certain. But what you're going to want to do is I have this big old string, and when I unclip it, so this is the female side on the top side of the engine, and this is what's running down to the neutral safety switch. You can see I tied a big yellow string to it because when I unbolt it, I'm gonna pull it down to the floor so that I can actually clean it off. When I do that, there's not a ton of slack here. This is going to drop down towards the bottom side of the tranny, and you're gonna have a real hard time pulling it back up unless you tie a string to it. So save yourself all the trouble. Tie a string to the male side of the neutral safety switch electrical connector. So when you pull it down through, you can just pull it right back up and connect it when you're done cleaning it. So let's bust out that 12 millimeter and 13/16 bolt on the actual neutral safety switch on the side of the transmission. And then I'll crack the case open and I'll show you all the buildup and gunk that's in there that's corroding the copper contacts that allow you to start. And that's why you're having issues starting in neutral or park without jiggling the shifter. We'll clean all those up and this bad boy should start every time. So we have the neutral safety switch out. We got our yellow string tied to the wire harness. But this is what your neutral safety switch looks like. This is what you were dealing with. It's this side, 12 millimeter, 7/8. Don't worry about that. But here's the back side. This is how you crack the case. It's a bunch of Phillips head screws. We're gonna bust these out, and then you're gonna split the case right down the middle, right in that area, and then I'll show you all the corroded copper contacts in just a second. So this is what we're talking about here when I talk about these neutral safety switches. When we cracked the case, took out all the Phillips head screws. This is the internals. Let's see. Yeah, let me focus. It's very dirty. The copper, it's not shiny. There's no connectivity, and it's not transferring current. That's the other end of the side. These are the contacts that touch over here that need to line up when you're in park, reverse, or well, park or neutral is when it starts. Reverse, drive, 2, 3, and 1 do not start because they end up in these gaps. But this is way too dirty. There's all this corrosion and crap in here. This is what's causing it not to start every time. So we're gonna use brake parts cleaner or electric parts cleaner, get all this gunk and grime out of here, and I'm gonna sand this with about 220 grit, just a little bit to refreshen up these copper contacts. And then we'll reassemble and put it back in, and that's really it. Okay, so we just got done cleaning up the neutral safety switch. There's a lot less gunk in these two pieces. And if we get pretty close in here, try to focus, you can see these guys, there is a spring underneath each of them. I can push them in. The spring pushes them out so that they contact the other side of this neutral safety switch. Now we cleaned it out with brake cleaner, got all the gunk out, and then I did hit them with like some 220 grit sandpaper, just a light sanding to scuff up this copper so that it makes better contact with the pieces over here of the neutral safety switch when it lines up in park and neutral. Those are the only times it'll start. So now we're just gonna put it back together, put the Phillips head screws in, we'll reassemble, and then we will shove it back up in there onto the shaft of the transmission, put our 2 bolts in, the 7/8 and the 12mm, and connect the electrical, and that's really it. We should have starting issues no more.
And that's it. Neutral safety switch is back in. Starts every time right away in park and neutral. And the headlights work. So we're all done here.